Hello! Hello to another very short series of very short stories. 3 to be exact. And after 3 spooky and creepy horror stories, here are 3 funny ones. And who would be a better choice than the master of satire himself, Samuel Langhorne Clemens, better known under his pen name, Mark Twain. The first story is titled Luck. It reflects in Twain's very unique way his own views on war, on patriotism and human nature. Luck is one of Twain's lesser known, some would even call it neglected works. It received very little attention upon its publication in Harper's magazine in 1891, but, well, I might say undeservedly so, because it is a really funny story. The story is actually based on a true anecdote that Twain heard from his friend Joseph Twichell, but, of course, Twain added some details and even put a footnote to the title of the story stating that it was not a work of fiction. And in that regard, this story might even be more relevant than ever before because, well, I don't know about you, but looking at the news every day and the political and social situation all around the globe, it's hard to believe that satire is not dead, right? Because it seems that reality indeed is stranger than fiction. Let's start. Here is Luck by Mark Twain. Luck by Mark Twain. This is not a fancy sketch. I got it from a clergyman who was an instructor at Woolwich 40 years ago and who vouched for its truth. It was at a banquet in London in honour of one of the 2 or 3 conspicuously illustrious English military names of this generation. For reasons which will presently appear, I will withhold his real name and titles and call him Lieutenant General Lord Arthur Scoresby, V.C., K.C.B., etc., etc., etc. What a fascination there is in a renowned name. There sat the man in actual flesh, whom I had heard of so many thousands of times since that day 30 years before, when his name shot suddenly to the zenith from a Crimean battlefield to remain forever celebrated. It was food and drink to me to look and look and look at that demigod, scanning, searching, noting the quietness, the reserve, the noble gravity of his countenance, the simple honesty that expressed itself all over him, the sweet unconsciousness of his greatness, unconsciousness of the hundreds of admiring eyes fastened upon him, unconsciousness of the deep, loving, sincere worship welling out of the breasts of those people and flowing toward him. The clergyman at my left was an old acquaintance of mine, clergyman now, but had spent the first half of his life in the camp and field as an instructor in the military school at Woolwich. Just at the moment I have been talking about, a veiled and singular light glimmered in his eyes, and he leaned down and muttered confidentially to me, indicating the hero of the banquet.
with a gesture. Privately, he's an absolute fool.
This verdict was a great surprise to me. If its subject had been Napoleon or Socrates or Solomon, my astonishment could not have been greater. Two things I was well aware of: that the Reverend was a man of strict veracity, and that his judgment of men was good. Therefore I knew, beyond doubt or question, that the world was mistaken about this hero. He was a fool. So I meant to find out at a convenient moment how the Reverend, all solitary and alone, had discovered the secret. Some days later, the opportunity came, and this is what the Reverend told me. About 40 years ago, I was an instructor in the military academy at Woolwich. I was present in one of the sections when young Scoresby underwent his preliminary examination. I was touched to the quick with pity, for the rest of the class answered uprightly and handsomely, while why, dear me, he didn't know anything, so to speak. He was evidently good and sweet and lovable and guileless, and so it was exceedingly painful to see him stand there as serene as a graven image and deliver himself of answers which were veritably miraculous for stupidity and ignorance. All the compassion in me was aroused in his behalf. I said to myself, when he comes to be examined again, he will be flung over, of course, so it will be simply a harmless act of charity to ease his fall as much as I can. I took him aside and found that he knew a little of Caesar's history, and as he didn't know anything else, I went to work and drilled him like a galley slave on a certain line of stock questions concerning Caesar, which I knew would be used. If you'll believe me, he went through with flying colors on examination day. He went through on that purely superficial cram, and got compliments too, while others, who knew 1,000 times more than he, got plucked. By some strangely lucky accident, an accident not likely to happen twice in a century, he was asked no questions outside of the narrow limits of his drill. It was stupefying. Well, all through his course I stood by him with something of the statement which a mother feels for a crippled child, and he always saved himself, just by miracle, apparently. Now, of course, the thing that would expose him and kill him at last was mathematics. I resolved to make his death as easy as I could, so I drilled him and crammed him and crammed him and drilled him just on the line of questions which the examiners would be most likely to use, and then launched him on his fate. Well, sir, try to conceive of the result. To my consternation, he took the first prize, and with it he got a perfect ovation in the way of compliments. Sleep? There was no more sleep for me for a week. My conscience tortured me day and night. What I had done purely through charity and only to ease the poor youth's fall. I never had dreamed of any such preposterous results as the thing that had happened. I felt as guilty and miserable as Frankenstein. There was a wooden head whom I had put in the way of glittering promotions and prodigious responsibilities, and but one thing could happen. He and his responsibilities
would all go to ruin together at the first opportunity. The Crimean War had just broken out. Of course there had to be a war, I said to myself. We couldn't have peace and give this donkey a chance to die before he is found out. I waited for the earthquake. It came, and it made me reel when it did come. He was actually gazetted to a captaincy in a marching regiment. Better men grow old and grey in the service before they climb to a sublimity like that, and who could ever have foreseen that they would go and put such a load of responsibility on such green and inadequate shoulders? I could just barely have stood it if they had made him a cornet, but a captain, think of it! I thought my hair would turn white. Consider what I did. I, who so loved repose and inaction. I said to myself, I am responsible to the country for this, and I must go along with him and protect the country against him as far as I can. So I took my poor little capital that I had saved up through years of work and grinding economy and went, with a sigh, and bought a cornetcy in his regiment, and away we went to the field. And there, oh dear, it was awful. Blunders? Why, he never did anything but blunders. But, you see, nobody was in the fellow's secret. Everybody had him focused wrong, and necessarily misinterpreted his performance every time. Consequently, they took his idiotic blunders for inspirations of genius. They did, honestly. His mildest blunders were enough to make a man in his right mind cry. And they did make me cry, and rage and rave too, privately. And the thing that kept me always in a sweat of apprehension was the fact that every fresh blunder he made increased the lustre of his reputation. I kept saying to myself, he'll get so high that when discovery does finally come, it will be like the sun falling out of the sky. He went right along up from grade to grade over the dead bodies of his superiors until, at last, in the hottest moment of the battle of, down went our colonel, and my heart jumped into my mouth. For Scoresby was next in rank. Now for it, said I. We'll all land in Sheol in 10 minutes, sure. The battle was awfully hot. The Allies were steadily giving way all over the field. Our regiment occupied a position that was vital. A blunder now must be destruction. At this crucial moment, what does this immortal fool do but detach the regiment from its place and order a charge over a neighboring hill where there wasn't a suggestion of an enemy? There you go, I said to myself. This is the end at last. And away we did go, and were over the shoulder of the hill before the insane movement could be discovered and stopped. And what did we find? An entire and unsuspected Russian army in reserve. And what happened? We were eaten up. That is necessarily what would have happened in 99 cases out of 100, but no, those Russians argued that no single regiment would come browsing around there at such a time. It must be the entire English army, and that the sly Russian game was detected and blocked. So they turned tail, and away they went pell-mell over the hill and down into the field in wild confusion, and we after them. They themselves broke the solid Russian center in the field and tore through, and in no time there was the most tremendous rout you ever saw, and the defeat of the Allies was turned into a sweeping and splendid victory. Marshal Canrobert looked on, dizzy with astonishment, admiration, and delight, and sent right off for Scoresby, and hugged him and decorated him on the field in presence of all the armies. And what was Scoresby's blunder that time? Merely the mistaking his right hand for his left. That was all. An order had come to him to fall back and support our right. And instead, he fell forward and went over the hill to the left. And the name he won that day as a marvelous military genius filled the world with his glory, and that glory will never fade while history books last. He is just as good and sweet and lovable and unpretending as a man can be, but he doesn't know enough to come in when it rains. Now, that is absolutely true. He is the supremest ass in the universe, and until half an hour ago, nobody knew it but himself and me. He has been pursued day by day and year by year by the most phenomenal and astonishing luckiness. He has been a shining soldier in all our wars for a generation. He has littered his whole military life with blunders, and yet has never committed one that didn't make him a knight or a baronet or a lord or something. Look at his breast. Why, he is just clothed in domestic and foreign decorations. Well, sir, every one of them is the record of some shouting stupidity or other, and taken together they are proof that the very best thing in all this world that can befall a man is to be born lucky. I say again, as I said at the banquet, Scoresby's an absolute fool.